And also, interestingly, I had read that, believe it or not, that there was a chemical thing in our brains. If you have a sister, having a sister is actually good for your mental health. I had read that. And I thought, wow, what's that all about? So I got busy exploring sisters and their bonds and their connections and the fraying of the bonds and the putting together of the bonds, or the holding on to the bonds or losing the bonds. All of those stories are just so right when it comes to sisterhood.
So the idea that having a sister is good for your mental health. Let's just go there for a minute, because I love that. I have 2 sisters. I'll tell you about them in a minute. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dream Leapers. I'm your host, Harriette Cole, and let me begin with Happy New Year. It is 2026. Can you believe it? The year is here. Are you ready for it? Well, I wanted to start out this year with joy, because I think it's very important for us to choose joy, especially with all the things that are going on in our world. And I have brought someone on today who is perfect for this conversation. She is Deborah Roberts. You know who she is. She's an award-winning journalist, ABC News senior national affairs correspondent, and co-anchor of 2020. Throughout her career, she has reported extensively on worldwide breaking news, major events, politics, and social justice. Her work has earned her multiple Emmy Awards, a Peabody Award, and the respect of viewers and colleagues alike for her honest and purposeful storytelling. She has covered stories on the HIV/AIDS crisis in Africa, on maternal mortality in Bangladesh, and on Breonna Taylor, whose name was at the forefront of police brutality, a protest during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the police officer who was in jail is out now on appeal. So an interesting turn of events. Deborah Roberts is also an author. And the last time she joined us here on Dream Leapers, she had just released Lessons Learned and Cherished, The Teacher Who Changed My Life, which, by the way, is now a New York Times bestseller. So today she has a new book, and we're going to be discussing this book. It is called Sisters, Loved and Treasures, Stories of Unbreakable Bonds. It's a collection of personal stories and meditations honoring the transformative power of sisterhood. Please join me in welcoming Deborah Roberts.
Hi.
Hello. Congratulations.
Thank you. And you know how to make a girl feel good. I have to tell you, you always, you talk about joy, you bring the joy, and you bring the passion, and you bring the sisterhood, which is so perfect for this topic today, Harriette.
I have so enjoyed reading your book. I just want to say, for people who are looking to access joy, which I hope is everybody, but sometimes we just need a little something. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but these personal stories and honest stories, honest stories of actual sisters who have grown up together in lots of different ways, and just who are choosing love and figuring it out. And Deborah, I don't think I knew what a big family you come up with.
Yes, I was going to say, including my own. Yes.
Start with your story.
I grew up with 6 sisters, so a large family of 9 children, 7 girls and 2 boys. So when I say to people, I kind of wrote about what I knew, I certainly knew about the sister journey. And I grew up with this cacophonous house and the sisters and going in and out in different stages of life. And I'm the 7th, so I have 2 younger sisters. And so I had the whole, older sister crowd and finding your way in the middle of all of this. And over the years, my sisters and I have kind of cycled in and out of each other's lives. Some of them I'm closer to than others. 1 or 2 maybe I've had a little bump with. Maybe somebody else I found a little distance with. And that's what got me thinking, Harriette, when I would talk to friends of mine about their sisters. And of course, you and I, working in the industry that we work in, we know so many amazing women. And oftentimes we talk about the sisterhood. Yes. And just talking too biologically about the sisterhood, I thought was so interesting because I have such varied experiences in my own family. And when I would talk to other people about their sisters, I learned that the stories were either similar or that I could relate, or that just so many different things to talk about when it comes to sisters. And also, interestingly, I had read that, believe it or not, that there was a chemical thing in our brains. If you have a sister, having a sister is actually good for your mental health. I had read that. And I thought, wow, what's that all about? So I got busy exploring sisters and their bonds and their connections and the fraying of the bonds and the putting together of the bonds, or the holding on to the bonds or losing the bonds. All of those stories are just so right when it comes to sisterhood.
So the idea that having a sister is good for your mental health. Let's just go there for a minute, because I love that. I have two sisters. I'll tell you about them in a minute. But that biologically, that chemically, it could be healthy to have sisters. What can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, the studies, were not deep scientific studies, but there were studies that were done, conducted with women and sisters, and there was some feeling that women sort of, and I really believe, while this may not have been a part of the study, of course, I know, and you know, that women are very intimate creatures. We have a tendency to really get in there and talk to each other and to explore our feelings and the depths of our feelings in ways that men don't necessarily do, say with brothers. And I'm convinced that because women are willing to do that, and because we support each other oftentimes, so often as sisters, that there is something there. And that little spike of either dopamine or serotonin really does increase when you have a sister in your life that you feel something good about. Mm-hmm. And having a sister actually can boost. There's the protective part of it, because oftentimes we have sisters who are really protectors. There is the confidant part of it, sisters who are there for you. And all of those things contribute to the idea of a boost in your perception of yourself and your well-being. So that, I think, is a part of all of this. And it made it so much more intriguing to me to explore.
There's a part you kind of flow throughout the book, little bits about you and your family, but there's something that I really appreciated reading about the evolution of your family. And because there's so many sisters, it kind of works as an example, but how you got better over time at taking care of each other. And that even there, it sounded like there was a sister who has left us who maybe didn't get the benefit of all the maturation that you have today. Can you speak about that evolution?
Well, it's the reality, right? And I thought, if I'm going to talk about my own family, then I need to be honest, and I really need to sort of dig in there and let's talk about our relationships and our bonds over the years. And one of the things I discovered in talking to others is that there is an evolution. I mean, so many people talk about growing up as children, depending on the age gap. If you're close in age, 18 months or 2 years apart, how oftentimes they grew up like twins practically and had such a tight bond. And oftentimes, if there's a bigger gap, 5 years, 6 years longer, sometimes it's been a little bit difficult to try to connect when you were younger, and then maybe you found that bond when you were older. Well, the same was true in my family. We have a range of age differences. My youngest sister is 5 years younger than I am, but my oldest sister was 18 years younger than she is. And so she kind of didn't really know her that well compared to, say, the older sisters who were connected to her. So there are all kinds of machinations that go on in a family. And many times those things kind of ripen as we get older. And my sisters and I have found that. And as I mentioned in the book, I have two sisters who have dealt with cancer. One of them who is fighting right now, who's dealing with a cancer battle. Another one who is a thriver from breast cancer. We have all sort of, I think, really wrapped our arms around each other in our period in life right now in ways maybe that we would not have paid attention to each other when we were younger. And certainly health is something that we prioritize so much more now. But to your point, I had a sister who struggled with mental illness. Now that we look back on it, we didn't necessarily know her diagnosis at the time, alcoholism. And I don't know that I was as understanding and accepting. And the same is true with other siblings too. We weren't as understanding as we might be today because we know so much more now. And I think we all, when we talked about that, had a certain feeling of regret and sadness and some guilt about that. And who doesn't? I talked to many sisters who can look back on issues of their lives and think, I didn't handle that as well. But now I treasure my sister so much more. And I really want to think about our relationship in a different way. So there's a lot there to explore about the relationships past and present.
So much. I mean, I haven't read every story, but I've read a lot of them and have found reflections of myself and my sisters in some of them. I'll tell you a couple things. Well, I'm the middle of three sisters.
Okay.
I am the exact middle child ever. I am the mediator. I'm the one who wants everybody to be happy. I fulfill that role.
Uh-huh.
My older sister's 2 years older than I am. My younger, 4 years younger.
Okay. That's a big enough gap.
Yeah, but who I'm closest to is my younger sister.
Oh.
When she was born, so my older sister and I lived in the same room. When Stephanie, my younger sister, was born, before she came home from the hospital, I made the decision that she was mine.
And she's your little baby.
And I moved into the room with her and decided that I was going to take care of her for the rest of her life. Literally. I mean, it's a very conscious effort.
Sweet.
We are as close as anybody could be.
Nice.
It took until adult years for me to be close with my sister, Susan. She's tough. She's tough. The older one. That you have people in your book who, like, the big sister did not want the little sister hanging out with her.
Yeah.
That was my sister. Like, you stay in your lane. I don't want you. You know, she was not having me.
That is true.
Tough. You have a lot of
these stories time and time again, Harriette. I heard so many of the same stories.
I know. I read them. And then for my younger sister, she was coming up behind me. We all went to the same high school. She was coming up behind me, and I was the straight A student. Every class that she would go in, that I had the teacher, they'd say, okay, what are you going to bring? Because Harriette
was here and she was fabulous. What about you?
You have these stories in your book. I'm like, oh, there I am. There they are.
Exactly. Patricia Blanchette and her daughter, her sister Natalie, talked about that.
Yes.
And that's what was so freeing in a way about writing this book and collecting these stories. Because for those of us who might have felt a little bit alone in some of our stories, or maybe a certain amount of guilt, pardon me, we found ourselves in other stories.
Yes.
And that was so important to me.
I mean, I love it. I found it fascinating, Deborah, it felt good to know, okay, you're not alone, girl. There you are, there you are, there they are, there they are. And so you included many people's stories, some who are very well known, many who are not. You have a fascinating section with twins. So let's talk about the twins for a minute, because my next door neighbor just had twins. She now has 4 children. My hat's off to her. And she came home from the hospital so soon. I was like, how did that happen? When I had my daughter, it took me a week. Well,
yes.
I had a C-section. She did not. She delivered those children. My hat is off to her. But, so I've been thinking about twins because she just had twins. You talked to a number of twins, both identical and fraternal. And that just tell us some of the highlights that you learned from them.
I was fascinated by the twin story. My assistant is a twin. And for the longest time, I did not know that when she first started off with me. But she informed me about the special relationships that twins share. And of course, we've heard this over the years, how they share a special language. There's a name for it called cryptophagia. They almost in the crib, they're babbling and nobody can figure out what they're saying, but they seem to relate to each other. They know and understand each other. There really is a connection. And when I talk to some of these twins, particularly identical twins, who talked about how they could almost feel each other's pain, they could almost read each other's thoughts. They were womb mates, as one of them described it. Nobody can understand you as much as your womb mate. I just thought that was a special brand of sisterhood, to come into this world with somebody. Jenna Bush Hager and her sister Barbara, who've talked a lot about their twinship, shared their stories of connection. And, little girls, when they're the grandfather was president, and then their father went on to be president, and how they just had each other because they're in this world that was so foreign and scary and difficult for them, but they had each other. And I just thought that was such an interesting relationship that rarely did I hear much about rivalry amongst the twins. It was really more about connection, how they almost didn't want to live without each other. Barbara and Jenna talked about, as weird as it may sound, and they're married and they each have their individual families, they almost want to leave this earth together because they came together. So that bond with them is so tight. I just thought it was really, really fascinating to hear. And I think for twins, they will find something there. And also what I thought was interesting, Harriette, is years ago, when we thought the twins needed to be separated to form their own identities, they talked about how that was so painful for them. They wanted to be together. That was a period in time where we thought we knew better sociologically what was better for these twins. So their stories, I thought, had a unique spin and just sort of an interesting twist about something that really is just deeply, deeply biological.
Yeah, I love that. Hey guys, this is Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole. We are talking with Deborah Roberts, and this is her book, Sisters Loved and Treasured, Stories of Unbreakable Bonds. It's a beautiful book. So before we leave twins, I want to talk about the twins that we both know, Karen and Kim, yes, who are identical twins. They yes, were both Olympic athletes.
Yes.
I mean, just that alone, they're identical twins. They were Olympic athletes. They are both very successful in their different areas of interest. But one of the things that you tell, and I don't remember who it was, but one of them said, you know, sometimes they'll be in a store and look in the mirror and speak to the mirror image because they think they're speaking to their sister.
The other. Yes, that's how connected they are. And these women, you're absolutely right, Harriette. I've known them for years. You've known them for years. But their story was so just so beautiful. How their partners, their husbands had to understand that we love you, but my sister is like, you know, first and foremost in my life. They made that very clear, and that they really have just sort of felt each other. One of them was struggling with fertility over the years, and right, the other one had not had that problem. But the one twin felt her sister's pain. And as she said, physically, once she knew that she felt something that her sister was going through. So their story was so remarkable and so beautiful. And the two of them just couldn't stop talking. And one of the things I really so enjoyed in putting this book together is the Zoom interviews. And I mostly did Zoom interviews because they were so much easier to find people and get our schedules together, to see them bouncing off of each other, finishing each other's sentences. And certainly that happened with Kim and Karen and amongst all the twins that I spoke with, but other sisters too, to watch them and that dynamic between them and what they meant to each other. Now, that's not to say there aren't sisters who have had their struggles, who are very different, who don't get along. You know, some of them talk very openly about the fact that if we weren't related and we weren't sisters, we may not necessarily be close with each other. That's a real honest take on what sisterhood is all about.
That people were honest with you about that, because sometimes they just want to put on the face. Mm-hmm. And part of why I was saying about the joy in this book, it's honest joy. It's not just, yes, oh, you know, it's bubble gum and yes, cotton candy. No, there's truth in the stories and growth in relationships, and also what people had to deal with. I mean, you have Viola Davis, who talks about her, and I've read her book and listened to her. She had a really, really tough childhood with an abusive father. And she talks about her sister bond being part of what made her able to survive, made them able to survive.
Yes, yes, what saved her. And her sisters filled different, you know, parts of her life, you know, the voids. One was there as her cheerleader. Another one was her protector. Another one was just a close, you know, companion. But that really defines what sisterhood can be about too, because as you said, Viola had a difficult childhood. I spoke with others who had tough things growing up when they were evolving as young people, and the trauma sometimes that some of them suffered. But the sister was there. And as somebody said to me in the book, who else knows your roots and who else knows your childhood? Connie Chung had a funny story about her sisters and how they kind of drove her crazy. She had so many of them, but yet they were there and they kind of helped look after her and protect her. She wasn't particularly close to all of them, but she looks back now and says they kind of shaped her and gave her a foundation. So that's what I think is so interesting. Many of us now look back on our childhood. And I, talked about that in the book with my own sisters, how we had an opportunity to talk about our growth and in our childhood and things that were difficult for us, but now seeing them through the lens of adulthood and in a way cherishing each other all the more because we realize what we were there for each other, how we were there for each other, and what we meant to each other growing up. So the stories are complex, and that's what I love about it. That's the journalist in me, Harriet. Yes. I don't like it to be all cookie cutter. I love when the stories surprised me. I love when the three sisters on Long Island talked about something that I just never could have imagined, where two of them had been mothers and one was struggling with fertility, and they all came to the conclusion that one of them would donate an egg and the other would carry the baby for her sister, and they broke into tears talking about it. And I was teary thinking, wow, could I imagine doing that with one of my sisters? There were so many interesting stories. Lee Woodruff, the writer who happens to be married to my colleague Bob Woodruff, talked about nearly losing her relationships with her sisters when they were settling her father's estate because they were fighting over what they thought was fair and unfair. And they went to therapy to preserve their bond. And I thought that was such a moment of honesty. And who hasn't had issues with your sister over maybe aging parents or something in the family?
I appreciated that because, well, all along the way in the book, you touch on different points in people's lives. And, from very young childhood to the growing up years to that transition when, this is a big one, the transition when a sister goes off to college and there's someone left. And all the way up to this, with a dying parent. But let's go to that part where the leaving. So I told you I'm the middle. I'm very, very close to my younger sister. But I was not so good on this point. When I left, I went away to school and I was gone. And my mother, I remember her calling me to say, you can't, way before cell phones. And she said, your sister is here. You cannot
forget about her.
And I didn't intentionally.
But you were separating yourself.
Yeah. But it didn't, your brain isn't even thinking about it. Now, thank God it did not negatively impact our relationship. But my mother was the one, she's like, wait a minute, girl, you can't just leave your sister. You have this life, but your sister is, she's such a big part of your life. Don't forget.
Yeah.
And I needed her to pull my coattails on that because when you go, it's like, okay, now you're going to have your life.
You're exploring your life, of course. And moms do that, Harriet. Brooke Shields' two daughters, Rowan and Greer, talked to me about how their mom had a huge impact on their sisterhood. And she made it very clear that your sister is there for you. Your sister is somebody you have to always hold dear and tight. And I did have many sisters talk about that example being molded and modeled for them by their moms. Yes. And it's interesting because my youngest sister and I have had some bumps along the way over the years. And part of it is just because we're very different personality types, but also she was 5 years younger. And I learned something. In some ways, researching this book helped heal something, at least in me, and I think even between the two of us, because I never appreciated how left behind she felt. Yeah. All the sisters had been filing out, all the siblings had been filing out of the house, including my oldest brother and then another brother. But she was there at home with my parents. She was the last one. And she said to me, I didn't really have anybody to explain much to me about boys or about my body as a young woman. And I felt sort of left behind. And that was the first time I realized, wow, there's a little hurt there for her as the youngest sibling. And I think, if anything, this book might help us sort of understand our sisters in ways maybe that we didn't necessarily consider before.
I definitely think so, because it goes through all the stages of life. I mean, so as a journalist, I don't know how intentional this was, but knowing you, I think it was. In the storytelling, you go through all the stages of life. And so a reader, and it's honestly depending upon what's happening in your life at the moment, because what I appreciate about the book is they're just little stories. You don't have to say, I have to sit down and I have to read this until the end. No, you can read any of the stories in any order that you want, and just moments that can take you in and get you to think. One of the things, Deborah, that I realized in reading it, well, first of all, like, I did not know that you came from such a large family, but who knew that Connie Chung did, or lots of these people you don't know. This is not something that people necessarily talk about all the time. We live at a time when a lot of people have less children. I have one child. A lot of people have no children, or one child, or very few.
Yes.
And you came from a family of 9.
Yes.
This is incredible. So you have captured stories with layered family dynamics for many of them who come from big families. Can you speak about what do you think is a special things about big families that maybe we should know, because many people aren't going to know moving forward?
Well, I think to the point that we made earlier, the different cycles that happen in families. I mean, as you said, you have a 4-year difference between you and your younger sister, 2 years between you and your older sister. And for those who might have had 3, 4, and 5 sisters, and I didn't have a lot of those, but I had a fair number, because people did have more children back in the day. That makes the relationship so much more complex, because you have different personalities, you have different age gaps, you have just different experiences. The experts say no 2 children grow up in the same home, really, because your parents are at different points in their lives. You don't have the same parents. Maybe your parents were more successful at one point with one child, or less successful. I was really surprised how many women talked about their moms having some kind of either emotional or mental distress, either postpartum, now that we look back and we know that. But many women, after having had one child, or maybe a couple of children back to back, maybe they were having what we now know to be postpartum depression. And that had an impact on some of these relationships as the siblings were growing up. Some of the sisters had to be there for a younger sister because mom wasn't quite able. Those stories were really compelling to me. But also, too, just the notion that it's a variety, when you talk about all these different sisters and personalities, they are not necessarily all going to be great. They're going to be challenging. They're going to be difficult. And, and I think also cutting yourself some slack. I often decided that it was me, because I have this big job that's kind of well known on television and so forth, then maybe somehow I've drifted from my siblings and I'm not as close, because my life is so different from most of them who have, maybe typical, professions, like an accountant, or maybe they work at, an insurance company. They have different lives. And it turns out I'm no different from anybody else who has a number of siblings. You just have different personalities. And sometimes you're going to have periods in life where you kind of wax and wane and you're not as close. I love Patricia Blanchet talking about how when she moved away, much like you, and her sister was either in high school or going off to college, and she moved out of the country for a little while, and they had a real distance between them, and they had been so close. And when she came back, she realized she needed to sort of re-earn her place with her sister, because they had drifted. Another couple of siblings told me about that, how when one of them was really young and you always saw her as just a young sister, and suddenly you went away to college and you came back and she was growing up and she was a young woman forming into a young woman who you could relate to suddenly, and your relationship shifted. Marva Smalls, who's a friend of ours, talked about her sisters and how they have cycled in and out. And because they've had different professions and personalities, it's been sort of an evolution over the years. And I thought that was just so nice to see that that's common, that you're not unique and you're not a bad sister. Maybe you'll vow to be a better, stronger, more connected sister after reading this book, but certainly it doesn't make you an unusually bad sister if you've had some difficulties over the years.
And I love the fact when you speak of Marva Smalls, an incredible businesswoman at the top, tippy top of her game. And there are a lot of very powerful women who you include in this book, and you get to see another side of them. Because we often see powerful men and powerful women kind of alone. We see them at the top, not with, so it doesn't look like there are a lot of people who are part of their world because they're up there. And well, we know Marva is such, not just a good sister, but an incredible connector
and philanthropist too.
We get to see another side of these people. That is something that I appreciate in your book as well. Let me remind folks, this is Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole. We are talking with Deborah Roberts, who has a new book. It is Sisters Loved and Treasured, Stories of Unbreakable Bonds. I love Unbreakable Bonds because that is really what it's all about. You did interview a number of what we would call A-listers, celebrities, people who everybody knows who they are. I am curious, back to the we are all people, but in families, sometimes when there is someone who is the shining star to the whole world, it can have an impact on the family that can be difficult. How family members treat each other, if they get treated differently, if they're considered the favorite child or whatever it might be. Can you talk about what people had to say about that?
And I've seen that in my own family because I do have a higher profile position than all of my siblings. And I certainly have seen that, and I've been conscious of that. And, maybe even trying to apologize for that when I'm with my siblings, because I don't want anybody to think that I'm so far above them that we can't still be connected in the way that we were when we were at home in small town Perry, Georgia. And I think my sisters all have appreciated that, but I think we appreciated it more when we put it out on the table and began talking about it. Robin Roberts talked about having, her sisters who have, obviously had their own careers. Her older sister, Sally Ann, grew up in the media, and she, was an anchor woman in New Orleans for a very long time. Her sister, Dorothy, didn't have quite the same career. And then Robin, their baby sister, becomes this huge anchor on Good Morning America. And while that didn't necessarily factor into their story, they did talk about what those dynamics were like, having an older sister and one in the middle, and being honest about how they were there or not there, played tricks or did things with each other, and how now they really depend on each other, and how Robin's illness, when she was diagnosed with cancer and then at one point needed a stem cell transplant, and her sister Sally Ann came basically to save her life. Yes. And Robin talked about that, and Sally Ann was being very humble about it, and Robin said, no, let's own this. You said that you felt that you were born for this, you were there for me, which I thought was such a sister moment, her baby sister coming up to sort of amplify her and say, no, take your credit and your shine here where it's due. And I thought that was sort of another example of sort of the sisterhood at work. But Shonda Rhimes had a very interesting point when she talked about her siblings. I think Shonda, if I have this right, has a brother and then two sisters. Sandy and Shonda were the ones that I spoke with. And Sandy is Shonda's right-hand person. She runs Shondaland for her. And Shonda said, there is nobody I could have in my life running my world, running my business, but my sister. Who else would have my back and could I trust like my sister? Even though Shonda, of course, rose to great heights, but she was very conscious to make sure, too, that her sisters were a part of this and taking, part in her life. And I thought that was so interesting. Octavia Spencer, whom I've gotten to know over the years because I've interviewed her a few times, is from a large family, several sisters. And I may get it wrong. I think she's got 3 sisters. And she talked about how she has the bigger life now. But when she was a struggling actress and not making money, her sisters would occasionally send a check to her to just sort of help her along.
That story.
And now, of course, Octavia is doing everything she can to spread the joy and the wealth and the financial stability to her sisters, because now she's there. So she just had such a beautiful story about her sisters being like a pride of lionesses right there who got her back. And while they're all very different and they can have their moments, at the end of the day, they are treasured and they love each other. And that's what I think is so beautiful and special about these stories.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. There's also something that you wrote about, well, that is a through line for some stories, this notion of the favorite child, you know,
Mm.
that which is a tough one. And I remember when I was growing up, my mother was so clear. I do not have favorites. I love each of you the way you need to be loved. It wasn't
Oh,
so much like the same. Each of you needs something else. And so
different.
I remember my mother telling me something at one point. I'm like, how could I have not known that? And she
Mm.
said, well, I share information on a need to know basis. And now you need to know. And so it's so funny. And I lost my mother in May. She was 95 years old.
Oh my God, bless.
So, you know, I just have so many incredible memories, but that in particular, she loved us as we needed. That's what she said.
I love
There
that.
are people who say, well, she had a favorite. I never felt like that. And the people who say it was a favorite, it wasn't me. But
Yeah.
I didn't feel that. I just felt like she loved me for who I am. And
Yeah.
what more could you want from that? But I remember in your story,
Yeah.
siblings said that
My baby sister Belinda said, and you know what? It was such a moment of honesty, and it helped me and it touched me that she would be so vulnerable and put herself out there. And she said, you know, when we were little, there was a period where I thought mom loved you more. And I thought, wow, that really just got me. But then she followed up quickly to say, but look, of course, as an adult and with children of my own now, I certainly understand dynamics with mothers. And she said that was my childhood self who just felt a little insecure about that. And having my own children, I know there may be different levels with different ones in terms of your feelings. But she said, I did sort of feel that for a minute. And I really took that to heart because, again, that informed me a little bit about our relationship. She felt a little bit left behind because she was the last one in the household. Maybe she sort of felt that I had this special relationship with mom, which I do think my mom and I did have this sort of special relationship. And my son, Nick, and I have kind of a special relationship. Leela and I are so close. She's my girl. We go shopping together. But sometimes there's a tenderness for one child, you know, maybe because she needs something a little differently. And I said to my sister, Belinda, I think mom could see that I needed something that was a little different. So I think to put that out there and to be able to talk about that, Harriette, more than anything else to me was just so wonderful about the exploration of this book, not just in my own family with my sisters, but hearing other sisters actually explore topics that they hadn't really talked about before. I had one or two say, I never knew that. I never heard you say that before. I never knew you felt that way. And there were tears that were shed as sisters talked to me about this book, and happy tears, emotional tears, but just tears in talking about their lives in ways that they don't typically do.
What made you decide to make this book? I mean, I know you had made the book about teachers and the impact that teachers have, but why this book? Why now?
Well, after writing about teachers and having such a great reaction to it, you know, exploring our roots and where teachers played a part in our lives. When I started thinking about the next book, and my editors talked about, you know, writing about something else that was near and dear to my heart like that, and maybe following the same idea of like gathering some essays from people, was there another topic I wanted to explore? And I thought, how about siblings? Because I have a lot of them. And when we started talking about the dynamic, we kind of decided that really what made more sense was sisters, because I really had this sisterhood. And when I would talk with women, you know, they talked about whether it was biological sisters or just good friends, maybe some who don't have sisters. And I've had plenty of women who picked up this book or told me they wanted to buy the book. They don't have sisters. They wish they did, but they have nurtured and nurturing sisterhood amongst friends. And I felt that could speak to that as well. So I felt like it was a subject that was ripe for exploration. And again, when I read that study that said having a sister is good for your mental and emotional well-being, I thought, this, as a journalist, I really want to know more about this. And of course, once I started talking to folks, it just sort of took off, and I knew that this was something that was special.
I appreciate too that at a time when women are under attack, I mean, they are, we are, and to celebrate us and to celebrate an inherent power that exists among women, I think this is a special time for that. I have talked to many women of every walk of life who mean, there are a lot of struggles right now. You know, the anti-DEI impacts women
Mm-hmm.
as well as
Mm-hmm.
other people. And as you know, just among Black women, more than 300,000 Black women lost their jobs last year.
Yeah.
Why? Lots of reasons. But also there's a lot of contraction
Mm-hmm.
that I think exists in our culture, in our world, and some of it is targeted to women. So this positive look at the power and impact and depth and just light and love that women can have, that sisters can have, I feel like it's very good timing, Deborah, especially given what a lot of us are going through.
Yeah, and lifting us up too, and giving us permission, and sort of just giving us an impetus to just lift each other up. I mean,
Yeah.
Harriette, over the course of like preparing and talking about some of these stories, one of the things I really sort of enjoy is sometimes just looking up all those little sayings about sisters. And again, whether we're talking about biological sisters or just your sisterhood, your sister friend, I love, love, love some of these quotes. If I had a choice in every lifetime, I'd still pick you as my sister because you've always been my biggest blessing, somebody wrote. Sisters share more than blood. They share memories, secrets, and a bond that time cannot break. My happy place is me laughing with my sister. I mean, there are just so many great quotes. The longest friend in your life that you share a closeness with, no one else understands. A keeper of secrets, the only person able to love you, protect you, and annoy you at the same time. Let's be honest.
You know what? There was one part in the book where you talk about, I don't remember whose voice it is, but that point that the forgiveness can happen among sisters. Somebody had sold a whole baseball card.
Yes, Amy Wexler, who is a noted dermatologist here in New York, talked about that with her sister. She told it to me right off the bat. And that happened when Amy had gone off to college and her sister was home in high school. And Amy made it very clear in the very beginning, we are very different, Deborah. I'm telling you, if you're looking for just the happy-go-lucky sisters who are skipping through the park together, that ain't us. We're very, very different. I'm close and I love her. But she went on to explain when she was in school how they were so different. And Amy had this prized baseball card collection because she was nuts for sports. And her sister didn't really have a big appreciation for that. And when Amy was away, the sister sold the cards because she wanted the money for whatever. And Amy said, to this day, I still hold a grudge about that. Even though she has been there for me, she's been in my corner, things have happened, she's my sister, but I still do hold a bit of a grudge. So you know what, the relationships are not perfect.
It's life, but the love is bigger. And that's what she points out in her essay that, you know, I still remember. I love you anyway.
Exactly. And that's what happens. I mean, and that's what I learned from the book. That's what I took away for my own life, that my relationships with my sisters, Tina, Belinda, Benita, and Janet, those are my surviving sisters. I have lost 2 sisters and I've also lost 2 brothers. So there are only 5 of us. We cherish and treasure each other even more. What I've learned is our relationships don't have to be perfect. We don't have to see eye to eye on everything. I can get kind of exasperated with one of my sisters, but it doesn't mean that I don't have a closeness there and a bond and that I want to have your back and I have your best interest at my heart. And that is what I learned from putting this book together.
And again, it's just infused with so much joy, which I think is essential. We're beginning a year, and how are we going to begin this year? What are we going to be thinking about? It's so important how we use our time and
how we show up for each other.
How we show up for each other. And this notion too of sister friends, because I know that you have good friends, a number of good friends who've been your friends for a long time. You know, even as a busy professional woman in the spotlight, you know, I know that you have really close friendships with other women. Can you just speak about the value of the sister friends relationship that's even beyond the blood relationships?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because when I had my birthday back in September, and my sisters live all over. I have a sister in Texas and a sister in Florida and 2 sisters in Georgia. And so we don't see each other as often as we would like and as we obviously used to when we were closer to each other in the same state. And when they came to celebrate this book in October, we just had such a great time, and the connection was just beautiful and reconnected and rekindled and all of that. But when I had my birthday before that, the month before, it wasn't practical necessarily for me to, run and get together with my sisters, and I knew I would see them later. I got together with a bunch of my close women friends, just a handful of them. And we got together and we talked about that, about the sisterhood and how important that is in my life and all of our lives, to have women in your life who not only can you count on, but who will amplify you, who will help, help lift you up when you're sagging a little bit, beyond having my sisters who are there. But let's face it, sometimes you're a little more connected to somebody who shares maybe a career path with you, or just shares an environment with you. Living in New York City is not for the faint of heart, as you know. And
Right.
Not all of my sisters can relate to that, but a lot of my sister friends can. And so it's so important, I think, to have those women in your life who will lift you up. I said to Ann Patchett, the writer, when I saw her not long ago, we were talking about friends, and she mentioned a couple of her really dear friends, and one of them is Renee Fleming, the opera singer. And I said something to her about a couple of friends or somebody who I felt like maybe wasn't the most supportive. And she says, well, then she doesn't really need to be in your life as a sister friend then.
That's
Your
right.
sister friend group should be people who are there, who support you, who lift you up, who are there to, maybe not always tell you what you want to hear, maybe occasionally tell you something you don't want to hear, but more than anything else, to make sure that you are, held and embraced, and to feel good about yourself. And I think that is something that women and sister friends can do for each other in ways that maybe other folks just don't do for you.
That's beautiful. Before we go, I just want to share one more thing with you. It is about the book about teachers. And I thought of this at a very important time. I told you that my mother recently passed away. So she was a kindergarten teacher.
Oh, yes, I remember.
And she stopped working in 1965, Deborah. So this is a long time ago.
Yeah,
That's when
when
when my younger sister was born. At her funeral, there were multiple students of hers, kindergarten graduates, who are now elders, some with canes and wheelchairs, at the funeral.
I love that.
About the impact that Doris Cole had on their lives as a kindergarten teacher when they were little children.
How beautiful.
I thought of you in your book when this was said to me, because we knew what a treasure she was for us. But back to what you captured in that book. So for folks who haven't read it, I recommend that they read it too. You captured the value that teachers can have, the impact. Yes, the impact that a teacher can have on your life forever. So could you just address that one more time, just for everybody who's listening, about teachers? I think it's so important.
Well, this book started when I would talk about my sixth grade English teacher, Mrs. Dorothy Hardy. And so the book started years ago, whenever I would give a speech and I would talk about how this woman has such an impact on my life, and really set me on the path to becoming somebody who wanted to achieve excellence, and to speak well, and all those things that led to my career as a television journalist. So that was just sort of a natural for me to reflect on Mrs. Hardy. And when I started thinking about other high achieving people, or maybe just folks in general who might just be solid in their lives, maybe they haven't necessarily achieved anything in terms of fame, but who can look back and see a teacher. And almost anybody I would approach and ask, was there a teacher in your life that you still remember? Everybody would remember Mrs. McKenzie, Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Stonewalder. There would always be a name that would come up that people remembered, a teacher who at sometimes a pivotal time in their lives had an impact on them and made them feel that they could, that they were worthy, made them feel that they could be something. And I loved celebrating that idea of teachers who are unsung heroes. We all know that. They are such great people in our lives and in our classrooms, and they don't ever get the attention, and certainly not the financial gains they deserve. So this book, when I wrote this book, was like a real tribute and a love letter to teachers.
Well, and so here's love letter number 2, Sisters Loved and Treasured, Stories of Unbreakable Bonds. I love that you, as a news journalist, have found a way to just share big bursts of joy with people. And thank you for these contributions to our culture. Congratulations. And here's to a wonderful 2026.
Yes, let's definitely make that happen. And here's to sisterhood too, celebrating it at every level.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deborah Roberts. And thank you to all of you for joining. We appreciate you joining and listening to this wonderful conversation with Deborah Roberts. Read that book. It's just full of amazing stories. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.